Refer back to your turf plan drawing and measure and mark your base exactly where your pieces of turf are going to lay. Measure and mark from both directions, so when you bring in your turf, you can set it down in the spot that it's going to be laying in. When you're ready to cut the turf, you want to roll it out on a level surface. Starting from the end, measure down the edge of the turf and put a cut mark on the required measurement for your piece. Be sure to do this on both sides to guarantee a straight cut. Roll the turf back up so your cut lines are on top. Use a chalk line and put a straight line between your two cuts. With a sharp knife and a steady hand, follow your line and cut the turf as straight as possible. Next, we're going to flip the edges of the turf over to cut the excess material off. Start between the first and second tuft and follow that line all the way down. Keeping tension on your loose cutoff will help with your cuts. Once both edges are cut, roll your piece up and bring it into the yard. You want to set it down as close to position as possible, so when you roll it out, you don't damage the base. Once you roll the piece out, if you need to make minor adjustments, get around the edges and give it a light shake to get some air underneath it. This allows it to move easily. When cutting the turf out around objects, whether flat or curved, you want to fold the turf back, spot the distance you'd like it to go, and give it some relief cuts. You want your relief cuts close enough together so that the turf is able to lay flat on the ground while the flaps go up the object which you're cutting around. Once you've got your relief cuts done and your turf is laying nicely on the ground, come back and cut the flaps off. When cutting to sidewalks, patios, or other objects level with the turf, you want to pull back on the cutoff piece to allow you to see what you're cutting to. When cutting around trees or any other objects that are in the way of your turf plan, you need to give yourself big relief cuts to allow the turf to bend around the object. Take the turf back little by little, and make sure you don't cut deeper than necessary. The goal when cutting around trees or any other object that's in your turf plan is for your first straight relief cut to meet back up with itself behind the tree. When seaming two pieces of turf together, you want to set the additional piece as close as you can to your existing piece of turf. Roll it out and butt your edges together as flush as possible. With the piece in place, grab the turf on both sides of the seam and bend it apart. Lay down small sections at a time, paying close attention to the backing and whether or not it overlaps. If you need to cut some turf away, cut the piece that you just laid down, leaving the edge of the existing piece alone. Check your seam every couple of inches and work your way down the entire seam. If you end up with any gaps between your pieces, keep them under 1/8 of an inch. This will prevent your seam from being visible once you're finished. Once your seams line up nice, Cut a piece of seam tape to match the length of your seam. Fold both pieces of turf over and place seam tape centered on your seam. Spike both ends of the seam tape so it does not slide around when you're spreading the glue. Pour the glue evenly and spread it to the full width of the seam tape to get the strongest possible bond. Keep the amount of glue consistent throughout the entire seam. When laying down the turf to create your seam, you need help holding both sides up at the same time while you start at the opposite end of the seam. You want to lay down both pieces at the same time while keeping the fibers up and completely away from the glue. It's very important that you don't let the turf stick down ahead of where you're working. It's highly recommended that you have assistance with this step in the installation. Make sure to keep the fibers up and away from the glue to the very end of your seam. Once the turf is all laid down, come back and rub the seam with a lot of pressure on both sides to make sure that the glue is completely stuck down to both surfaces. You want to spike the turf on both sides of the seam every few inches. Use the nail to part the fibers and expose the backing. Make sure that when you pound the nail in, you do not trap any fibers underneath the head of it. Keep the nails as close to the center as possible, and repeat this throughout the entire seam.